So, picture this. You are sitting on your couch, just staring blankly at the ceiling, and you're listening to this awful synthesized pan flute music playing over your phone's speaker.
Oh, I know that music. I
Yeah.
know it all too well.
Right. And you've been on hold for, I don't know, 45 minutes, and every so often this robotic voice just cuts in to tell you that your call is, very important to them.
Which, clearly it isn't.
Exactly. Or maybe you're standing at a checkout counter, wallet in hand, and the staff behind the register are just having this deeply engaging conversation about their weekend plans, and you're just standing there feeling completely invisible.
Oh, yeah. It's like the ultimate modern test of human endurance, really. We have all been there, and it triggers this very specific, really intense psychological reaction.
It totally does.
Hmm.
Welcome to the deep dive, by the way. Today we're taking a massive stack of research from historical business archives to linguistic analyses, and we're exploring the whole concept of the customer is king.
Yeah, we're really unpacking where these sky-high expectations for service actually come from, why modern businesses so often fail to meet them, and how the power dynamic is kind of shifting today.
Right. And woven into this exploration is our secondary mission for this deep dive. We are going to supercharge your emotional English vocabulary.
Yes, because, when you're stuck in those terrible service moments, just saying, I was angry or it was bad, it just doesn't capture the actual toll it takes on you. So we want to equip you with the precise words to articulate those moments when service just goes entirely off the rails.
So to understand why bad service feels like such a, well, like a personal betrayal today, we really need to look backward at the economics of shopping. We walk around with this built-in expectation that businesses exist to bend over backward for us.
Yeah, we do.
But for the vast majority of human history, the relationship between a buyer and a seller was fundamentally adversarial. It was governed by this legal maxim, caveat emptor, which is Latin for let the buyer beware.
Right. Which practically meant that you were entirely on your own.
Like completely on your own?
Yeah. If you bought a pocket watch from a merchant and it stopped ticking the moment you walked out the door, or if you purchased flour that was secretly cut with cheap sawdust, the law essentially said, well, you should have checked more closely.
Wow, sawdust in the flour.
Yeah. The risk was entirely on the consumer. Misrepresentation was just the norm. You couldn't ask for a refund. You just took your chances.
I tried to picture that environment, and honestly, it sounds like navigating some shady pirates trading post.
It kind of was.
So the question is, how did the global economy transition from good luck, you're on your own, to treating the consumer like absolute royalty?
Well, the mechanism behind that shift is actually fascinating. It really comes down to the Industrial Revolution.
Okay.
Suddenly, factories were mass-producing goods. You had infinite supply. So a merchant couldn't survive anymore by just selling one terrible product to a traveler and never seeing them again. They needed repeat buyers.
That makes total sense. They needed loyalty.
Exactly. So retail pioneers in the early 20th century, people like John Wanamaker, Harry Gordon Selfridge, Marshall Field, they realized that in a marketplace where nobody trusted anyone, the ultimate competitive advantage was to actually manufacture trust.
So they figured out that making people feel safe spending their money was way more profitable than just scamming them once.
Yes, precisely.
And this concept just spread across the globe like wildfire. In 1908, the famous hotelier César Ritz coined his slogan in French, Le client n'a jamais tort, meaning the customer is never wrong.
Right. And over in Germany became Der Kunde ist König, so the customer is king.
Yeah. And the Japanese variation, Oyakusama wa Kamisama desu, elevates the consumer even further to the customer is a god.
It's wild. It completely inverted the power dynamic of that entire era.
I do wonder, though, how unhinged that must have sounded to people at the time. Like when Harry Selfridge brought his ideas to his new store in London in 1909, the British press openly ridiculed him.
Oh, they tore him apart.
Right. It would be like walking up to a medieval king and telling him his new job is to serve the peasants. But I was looking really closely at the research on Marshall Field in Chicago. The man universally credited with coining the customer is always right.
Oh, this is a great detail.
Yeah, historical researchers point out that Field was, quote, no master of idiom.
Right. That is one of the greatest myths in business history. Alfred Pittman, who was right back in 1919, noted that Field never actually treated that phrase as some magical, absolute philosophy.
He didn't.
No. Field actually implemented a much more practical operational rule for his floor staff. His rule was, assume the customer is right until it is plain beyond all question that he is not.
Assume they are right until it is plain beyond all question that they are not. I mean, that is a brilliant mechanism for preventing petty arguments.
It really is. Because if you treat people with initial trust, they generally behave better. It just eventually got shortened by the public into the really dangerous absolute statement that we use today.
And because we have internalized that shortened absolute, we walk into a hotel or, open a new laptop expecting a certain level of deference.
Definitely.
So when businesses fail to deliver, it doesn't just feel like a minor hiccup. It feels like a broken promise.
Which brings us to the emotional roller coaster of modern service failures. And this is where we really want to get into our vocabulary mission.
Yeah.
Take a scenario from the sources about a traveler named George.
Oh, George's story is rough.
It is. So George arrives at a hotel in Jakarta after this grueling 16-hour journey. He is carrying heavy luggage, he's completely exhausted, and he really just wants to sleep.
We've all been that kind of tired.
Right. So he gets to the front desk, and it is totally abandoned. He glances through an open doorway and sees the hotel staff in a back room completely glued to a football game on TV. They literally look at him and then just turn back to the game.
Oh my gosh, being actively ignored like that, especially when you were so vulnerable and exhausted, that pushes you way past simple anger. George wasn't just mad, he was completely infuriated.
Infuriated.
And that word infuriated, it really describes a boiling, intense, overwhelming fury. Like spilling coffee on your shirt makes you angry, but someone looking you in the eye, refusing to do their job, and returning to a screen while you were stranded, that leaves you absolutely infuriated.
Exactly. And George was so incredibly infuriated that he actually lost his cool and started shouting right there in the lobby.
Which, as the sources point out, triggers a massive cultural collision.
Yeah, big time. Because in many Asian cultures, including in Jakarta, raising your voice in public and causing a scene is a severe social violation. It's a profound loss of face.
Right. So by screaming in the lobby, George ensured the staff weren't just embarrassed, they were utterly mortified.
Utterly mortified. That is the perfect word.
I can't even imagine the tension in that room. And that level of being mortified, feeling this deep, floor-swallowing shame and public humiliation is probably exactly why a manager seemingly materialized out of nowhere, silenced the staff, upgraded George to a suite, and had his bags carried up immediately.
Yeah, the public shame essentially forced a major correction. Because no one wants to feel mortified in front of a lobby full of people.
Definitely not.
But, George's experience was explosive. Sometimes the breakdown in service is more of a slow burn. Like, contrast his situation with another case from our research involving a woman named Gemma.
Right, the electronics case.
Yeah. So she buys a flat-screen TV and a laptop from a major manufacturer. About 18 months later, which is conveniently just after the warranty expires, they both start malfunctioning. The TV just randomly turns itself off in the middle of shows.
Ugh. I've dealt with technology like that, and it is incredibly irritating.
So irritating.
Right. It isn't a life-ruining disaster like being stranded in a foreign country. It is a persistent, low-level annoyance. It is like a buzzing fly that slowly drains your patience.
Yeah, that's exactly what irritating means. The distinction between George and Gemma's reactions is really all about intensity and duration. Dealing with a glitchy TV every single week is deeply irritating because it's just this constant nagging inconvenience. But Gemma's situation really escalates when she reaches out for help. She emails this massive retail manufacturer, and instead of a human response, she gets a generic, copy-pasted auto-reply telling her to basically go contact the shop she bought it from.
Okay, I will play devil's advocate for a second here.
Yeah.
Isn't an automated email the only scalable way a massive tech company can handle millions of customer inquiries? Like, they kind of have to do it that way.
Well, from a logistical standpoint, perhaps, but from a psychological standpoint, it feels incredibly cold and impersonal.
Impersonal. Yeah.
Right. When a company that you gave your hard-earned money to treats you like a barcode moving down an assembly line, completely lacking any human warmth, it just destroys trust. It's too impersonal.
And Gemma felt that the automated brush-off was so brutally impersonal that she vowed to never buy from that brand again. It just goes to show that efficiency can sometimes cost you loyalty.
It really can.
And, the lack of human connection gets even more dangerous in high-stakes environments, like our third case study at the airport. Ugh, this one stressed me out just reading it.
Same. So this involves a passenger named Jonathan, and he's flying from Bangkok to Hanoi. He steps up to the check-in desk and hands over his ticket and passport.
Standard stuff.
Right. But the agent notices a discrepancy. When Jonathan bought the ticket online, His browser's autofill shortened his name on the ticket to John, but his passport officially says Jonathan. Just a very common administrative error.
Super common. But instead of helping him correct it, the agent's immediate reaction is to give him a harsh glare.
A glare. Yeah, and receiving a glare from someone holding your boarding pass is just jarring. It isn't just looking at someone. A glare is a silent, actively hostile stare.
It is. It communicates instantly that you are viewed as a problem, or honestly, even worse, as an enemy.
And receiving that aggressive glare instantly made Jonathan feel uneasy.
Naturally.
You know that feeling, that sinking, anxious dread in the pit of your stomach?
Yeah.
When someone in authority looks at you like a suspect over a simple typo, you become completely uneasy about what is going to happen next. Well, and his anxiety was totally justified, because the agent refuses to amend the ticket. She forces him to buy a brand new full-price ticket for the exact same flight just to board the plane.
That is insane.
I know. He has to pay double because of an autofill mistake, which obviously leaves him deeply resentful.
Resentful. Yeah, that makes perfect sense because this isn't just a quick flash of madness. Feeling resentful means holding on to a bitter, lingering grudge because you know you have been treated unfairly.
Exactly. His passport number matched, his photo matched, but they just exploited a typo to squeeze more money out of him. It's totally understandable why he'd feel resentful.
And because he was so resentful, he didn't just quietly take his flight. He took to social media and spent his time bad-mouthing the airline to his entire network, actively warning people away from their business.
You wanted them to pay for it.
Yeah. But I was reading ahead in our sources, and looking at Jonathan's story actually made me reconsider the entire premise for a second.
Oh, who so?
Well, what if Jonathan actually was wrong? I mean, autofilling a legal travel document is technically his mistake, not the airline's. Security protocols at international borders are rigid for a reason. Have we kind of swung the pendulum too far by assuming the customer is always the victim?
That is the critical counter-argument right there. And it's not a new argument either. Almost as soon as these customer-centric slogans became popular, industry insiders started sounding the alarm about the dark side.
Yes. I found this warning published way back in 1914 by a writer named Frank Farrington, and he explicitly told the retail industry that adopting a policy where the customer is unconditionally right ignores basic human nature.
Because humans are flawed.
Exactly. Customers can be dishonest, they can have entirely unrealistic expectations, or they can just misuse a product and then aggressively demand a refund.
Journalist Damon Runyon echoed that exact sentiment in 1939. He observed that while the slogan was intended to inspire confidence, it was actually making the public, quote, mighty brash. People were actively taking advantage of tradespeople.
Wow, even in 1939.
Yeah. And fast forward to modern business analytics. Experts argue this century-old philosophy has mutated into a pervasive sense of consumer entitlement. It is cited as a major factor behind the increasing aggression and verbal abuse directed at retail and service workers today.
Which is awful. Nobody should have to endure being screamed at while just scanning groceries or checking bags.
Absolutely not.
So if the customer is always right is this outdated, overly simplistic myth that actually hurts employees, how do modern businesses fix this? The research outlines 4 modern pillars of service to kind of replace the old slogan.
Yeah, let's go through them. The first pillar is keep it personal. The goal is to avoid making the consumer feel like they're being herded through a machine.
Right.
Small businesses do this naturally by remembering regulars, but massive corporations have to leverage technology like smart CRM systems to remember your preferences. The trick is utilizing that data to tailor the experience without crossing the line into feeling creepy or, overly automated.
Right, you want to feel recognized, not surveilled.
Exactly.
So the second pillar is be empathetic. This requires a business to actually understand the friction in their own systems. I read a case study where a CEO forced his executive team to navigate their own company's automated phone tree to try and resolve a fake issue.
Oh, I bet that was eye-opening.
They were completely horrified by how frustrating it was. So empathy means fixing the systems that cause customer rage before the customer ever picks up the phone.
That is so smart. Now, the third pillar is entirely driven by the internet. Know the industry. 20 years ago, the salesperson held all the cards, but today, information asymmetry is dead.
Yeah, we all have Google.
Right. A customer walks into a store already armed with reviews, global price comparisons, and full technical specs. So sales teams must be highly proficient, because if an employee provides misinformation, the buyer instantly knows, and all trust just evaporates.
It's gone instantly. Which brings us to the fourth pillar, and this is perhaps the most difficult balancing act. respect and dignity. This means training staff to stay calm and professional with agitated customers, de-escalating conflicts without surrendering their own dignity. But there is a really fascinating nuance here regarding who actually gets the most attention.
Yeah, this part of the research stood out to me. Often, staff will dedicate all their time and energy to the angry people you know with these squeaky wheels. Meanwhile, a customer with a sunny disposition who is polite and easy to deal with basically gets put on the back burner.
And neglecting polite people just because they are easier to handle is a massive failure of respect. It inadvertently trains consumers that the only way to get prompt service is to throw a tantrum. You have to reward the good behavior, not just manage the bad.
That's a great way to put it. So if we synthesize all of this, we are really looking at a profound evolution. We started in the chaotic markets of buyer beware, transitioned into an era where merchants worshiped the consumer to build trust, and now we're trying to find a realistic, sustainable balance.
Yeah, exactly. We need a system that treats the buyer with respect without stripping the employee of their dignity. And along the way today, we explored the emotional terrain of what happens when that balance fails.
We definitely covered some highly descriptive vocabulary today. And, you know, knowledge is most valuable when you actually use it. So I have a challenge for you, the listener.
Ooh, I love a challenge.
Drop a sentence in the comments below using one of the words we unpacked today. Glare, infuriated, impersonal, irritating, mortified, resentful, or uneasy. Describe a time you received terrible service, or just invent a scenario to practice the nuance of the word. We really want to see how you use them.
We genuinely love reading those comments. And hey, if you found this deep dive valuable, please give it a like, share it with a friend who appreciates a good conversation about the hidden mechanics of our modern world, or maybe someone who is just looking to elevate their English vocabulary. And definitely subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next deep dive.
And before we go, I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder, building on Jonathan's airport experience. In 1909, Harry Selfridge had to beg customers to trust him. But today, every single consumer walks around armed with a smartphone, a high-definition camera, and immediate access to global online reviews. One viral post can impact a massive company's stock price.
That's true.
So in this digital landscape, who really holds the power now? Is the customer more powerful than ever before, or have corporations just gotten better at managing us? Something to think about. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Yeah, next time you are stuck on hold listening to that pan flute music, just remember you aren't just waiting. You are experiencing the friction of a century-old business philosophy colliding with modern reality. See you next time.